Marcus Wellington III walked through the shiny hallways of Riverside Preparatory Academy like he owned the place. In many ways he did. His expensive shoes made clicking sounds on the marble floor. Every step he took showed confidence that came from never being told no. The 17-year-old boy had everything money could buy. His backpack cost more than most people made in a month. His watch was a gift from his father for his last birthday. Even his school uniform was custom-made by the best tailors in the city. Marcus stopped at his locker and looked at himself in the small mirror he had put inside. His blonde hair was perfectly styled. His blue eyes sparkled with the kind of brightness that came from a life without problems. He smiled at his reflection, pleased with what he saw. "Morning, Marcus," said Jennifer, a girl from his math class. She tried to sound casual, but Marcus could hear the nervous excitement in her voice. Everyone at school knew who he was. Everyone wanted to be his friend. "Hey," Marcus said without really looking at her. He was used to people trying to get his attention. It happened every day. Students wanted to sit with him at lunch. They wanted invitations to his parties. They wanted to be part of his world. Marcus grabbed his books and headed to first period. As he walked, other students moved out of his way. Some whispered to each other as he passed. He heard fragments of conversations about his family's latest donation to the school, or the new car his father had bought him. The classroom was already half full when Marcus arrived. He chose a seat in the back row, even though the teacher had assigned seats. Mrs. Patterson, his English teacher, looked up when he came in, but said nothing. She had learned, like all the other teachers, that it was easier to let Marcus do what he wanted. Marcus pulled out his phone and started scrolling through social media. His Instagram account had thousands of followers. Most of them were classmates who liked every photo he posted. The latest picture showed him at an expensive restaurant with his parents. The dinner had cost more than most families spent on groceries in a month. "Mr. Wellington," Mrs. Patterson said softly, "could you please put your phone away?" Marcus looked up with a small smile. "Sure thing, Mrs. Patterson." He made a show of putting the phone in his pocket but pulled it out again as soon as she turned around. Several students giggled quietly. They had seen this dance many times before. The morning continued like every other day. In chemistry class, Marcus talked loudly to his friends while Mr. Johnson tried to explain molecular structures. In math, he turned in homework that his private tutor had clearly done for him. In French, he made jokes in English that disrupted the entire lesson. Each teacher responded the same way. They gave him gentle warnings that meant nothing. They marked him present even when he was late. They graded his work more kindly than they should have. Everyone knew the rules, even if they were never spoken out loud. Marcus's father, Marcus Wellington II, was one of the richest men in the state. His technology company employed thousands of people. More importantly, for Riverside Preparatory Academy, he was also one of the school's biggest donors. The new library had his name on a gold plaque by the door. The computer lab had the latest equipment because of his gifts. The football field had been completely rebuilt with his money. This meant that Marcus III lived by different rules than everyone else. When he cheated on tests, teachers looked the other way. When he bullied other students, principals found excuses not to punish him. When his grades started slipping, somehow they improved on his report card. At lunch, Marcus sat at the center table in the cafeteria. The spot gave him a clear view of the entire room. He could see who was eating alone, who was trying too hard to fit in, and who might be worth his attention. His usual group gathered around him. There was Brad, whose father owned several car dealerships. Sarah, whose mother was a famous lawyer. Tom, whose family had old money from oil investments. They were all rich, but none of them were as rich as Marcus. "Did you guys hear about the new teacher?" Brad asked between bites of his sandwich. "What new teacher?" Marcus asked, not really interested. "History teacher. Starting Monday. Supposed to be really strict?" Marcus laughed. "They're all strict until they meet me. Give it a week. She'll be just like the rest of them." The others laughed too. They had seen it happen before. New teachers came in with big ideas about discipline and fairness. Then they learned who Marcus was. They learned about his family's influence. They learned that fighting him was not worth the trouble. After lunch, Marcus had study hall. Instead of studying, he walked around the school grounds. The campus was beautiful, with old brick buildings and perfectly kept gardens. Everything looked expensive because everything was expensive. He found himself thinking about the new teacher Brad had mentioned. Marcus always enjoyed breaking in new faculty members. It was like a game to him. How long would it take for them to give up? How many disruptions before they stopped trying to control him? Some teachers lasted a few days. Others held out for weeks. But they all eventually understood the reality of Riverside Preparatory Academy. Some students were more important than others. Some parents had more influence. Some donations carried more weight. Marcus pulled out his phone again and called his driver. "Pick me up at the main entrance," he said. "I'm done for the day." It was only 2 in the afternoon, but Marcus was bored. He had 3 more classes scheduled, but he knew the teachers would mark him present anyway. His father's secretary would call in the morning with some excuse about a family emergency or a medical appointment. As he waited for his car, Marcus watched other students through the windows. They were sitting in classrooms taking notes, raising their hands to ask questions. They actually cared about their grades. They actually worried about getting in trouble. Marcus felt sorry for them. They worked so hard for things that came easily to him. They stressed about college applications while his admission to the best schools was already guaranteed. They saved money for months to buy things he could get with a single text to his father. The black sedan pulled up exactly on time. Marcus got in without saying hello to the driver. He was already thinking about his plans for the evening. Maybe he would go shopping. Maybe he would visit one of his father's offices and play video games in the break room. Maybe he would throw a party at the house while his parents were at another charity event. As the car drove away from school, Marcus looked back at the building one more time. Tomorrow would bring the new history teacher. Tomorrow would bring another chance to show everyone at Riverside Preparatory Academy exactly who was in charge. Marcus smiled to himself. He had no idea that his entire world was about to change. Elena Rodriguez walked into her new classroom early Monday morning. The sun was just starting to come through the tall windows. She set her old leather bag on the wooden desk and looked around the room. Everything at Riverside Preparatory Academy was expensive and beautiful. The desks were made of real wood, not cheap plastic. The walls had paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. Even the chalkboard was the fancy kind that worked with special markers. Elena had taught at public schools before this. Those classrooms had broken chairs and old textbooks. The walls had cracks and the heat didn't always work in winter. This place was like a palace compared to what she was used to. She opened her bag and took out her lesson plans. Elena had spent the weekend preparing for her first day. She wanted everything to be perfect. Teaching jobs were hard to find, and she needed this one to work out. The bag was old and worn. The leather was cracked in several places. Elena had owned it for more than 10 years. It had been with her through many changes in her life. Some of those changes had been harder than others. Elena began writing on the whiteboard. Her handwriting was neat and clear. She wrote the day's topic, economic systems around the world. She planned to start with a discussion about different ways societies organize themselves. Students began arriving as the morning bell rang. Elena stood by the door and smiled at each one. She tried to remember their names from the roster she had studied. "Good morning, Jennifer," she said to a blonde girl. "Good morning, Ms. Rodriguez," Jennifer replied, looking surprised that the teacher knew her name. More students came in and found their seats. Elena noticed they all looked the same in some way. Their clothes were expensive. Their backpacks were designer brands. Their shoes were probably worth more than Elena's monthly car payment. The second bell rang, which meant class should start. Elena looked at her attendance sheet. She was missing one student. Marcus Wellington III. Elena decided to begin anyway. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Ms. Rodriguez, and I'm excited to be your new history teacher." The students looked at her politely, but without much interest. Elena was used to this. Teenagers were often hard to impress, especially on Monday mornings. "Today we're going to talk about different economic systems," Elena continued. "Can anyone tell me what they know about capitalism?" A few hands went up. Elena called on a boy named Tom. "It's when people can own businesses and make money," Tom said. "That's a good start," Elena said. "What else?" The discussion was just getting interesting when the classroom door opened. A tall blonde boy walked in like he was in no hurry at all. He didn't apologize for being late. He didn't even look at Elena. Elena checked her attendance sheet. This had to be Marcus Wellington III. She had heard whispers about him in the teacher's lounge on Friday. The other teachers had given her warnings, but they were vague. They told her to be careful. They said his family was important, but nobody told her exactly what that meant. "Mr. Wellington," Elena said calmly, "you're 20 minutes late." Marcus stopped and looked at her with surprise. No teacher had ever called him out for being late before. He recovered quickly and gave her his best charming smile. "Sorry about that, Ms. Rodriguez. Family business." He didn't sound sorry at all. Elena made a mark on her attendance sheet. "Please take a seat so we can continue." Marcus looked around the room like he was choosing where to sit. All the other students watched him carefully. Elena noticed they seemed nervous. Marcus chose a seat in the back row and immediately pulled out his phone. The screen lit up his face as he started scrolling. "Mr. Wellington," Elena said, "please put your phone away and join our discussion." Marcus looked up again, this time with less charm and more annoyance. "I'm listening," he said, but kept the phone in his hands. "The phone needs to be put away completely," Elena said firmly. The room got very quiet. The other students looked back and forth between Marcus and Elena like they were watching a tennis match. This was clearly not how things usually went. Marcus stared at Elena for a long moment. She stared back without blinking. Finally, he made a show of putting the phone in his pocket, but Elena could see he was angry. "Thank you," Elena said. "Now, as I was saying, capitalism is based on private ownership and free markets. But what happens when some people have much more money than others?" The discussion continued, but Elena could feel tension in the room. Marcus sat in the back with his arms crossed, not participating. The other students kept glancing at him, like they expected him to do something. After class, several students lingered as they packed their bags. Elena heard whispers but couldn't make out the words. She did catch Marcus's name mentioned several times. Jennifer approached Elena's desk. "Ms. Rodriguez?" she said quietly. "Yes, Jennifer. Are you sure you want to—" Jennifer looked around to make sure Marcus was gone. "Are you sure you want to be so strict with Marcus?" "I treat all my students the same way," Elena replied. "Is there a reason I shouldn't?" Jennifer looked uncomfortable. "It's just, nobody really does that. His family is very important to the school." Elena felt a familiar feeling in her stomach. She had dealt with privileged students before, but never at a school like this. "What do you mean by important?" "His dad gives a lot of money to the school." "Like a lot?" "The library is named after his family." Elena nodded slowly. Now she understood the warnings from the other teachers. Now she knew why everyone seemed so careful around Marcus. But Elena had principles. She had grown up poor and worked hard for everything she had. She believed that respect had to be earned, not bought. Rich or poor, all her students would follow the same rules. The next few classes went similarly. Marcus came late to each one. He disrupted discussions with loud whispers to his friends. He never took notes. He acted like the rules didn't apply to him. By the end of the day, Elena was tired but not defeated. She had taught difficult students before. She had worked in tough schools where students had real problems at home. Marcus was just spoiled, not dangerous. That evening, Elena sat in her small apartment grading papers. Her place was nothing like the mansion where Marcus probably lived. The furniture was second-hand. The TV was old. The carpet had stains that wouldn't come out, but Elena was proud of her home. She had earned every piece of furniture by working hard. She had overcome challenges that Marcus couldn't even imagine. She wasn't about to let one spoiled teenager make her compromise her values. Elena made notes about each student's participation that day. Next to Marcus's name, she wrote, "Late to class, disruptive, needs clear boundaries." She had no idea that Marcus was at that very moment planning how to make her life miserable. He was already texting his friends about the new teacher who had dared to treat him like everyone else. Marcus was used to winning. He was used to getting his way. Teachers who challenged him usually gave up quickly once they learned who his father was. But Elena Rodriguez was different from the other teachers Marcus had broken. She had faced much bigger challenges than one spoiled rich kid. She had overcome obstacles that would have crushed someone weaker. The battle lines were drawn, though neither of them knew it yet. Marcus expected Elena to back down like all the others had. Elena expected Marcus to eventually learn to respect the rules like everyone else. Both of them were about to learn they were wrong. The war between Marcus and Ms. Rodriguez began the very next day. Marcus arrived 15 minutes late to Tuesday's class. This time he brought coffee from the expensive cafe downtown. The cup had the store's logo on it, showing everyone how much money he had spent on a simple drink. Mr. Wellington, Ms. Rodriguez said as he walked in, this is the second day in a row you've been late. Marcus took a slow sip of his coffee before answering. Traffic was really bad today. He said it with a smirk that told everyone he was lying. Please see me after class, Ms. Rodriguez said calmly. Marcus shrugged like he didn't care, but inside he was surprised. No teacher had ever asked him to stay after class before. They were all too afraid of his father's reaction. During the lesson about the Industrial Revolution, Marcus made sure to disrupt as much as possible. When Ms. Rodriguez asked a question about factory working conditions, Marcus raised his hand. Yes, Mr. Wellington. I think people who complain about their jobs should just find better ones, Marcus said loudly. If they don't like working in factories, they should become rich instead. Several students laughed nervously. They could tell Marcus was trying to upset the teacher, but they weren't sure if they should join in. Ms. Rodriguez took a deep breath. That's an interesting perspective, Marcus. But what if someone doesn't have the same opportunities you've had? What if they were born into poverty? Then they should work harder, Marcus replied. My family got rich because we're smart and we work hard. Poor people are just lazy. The room got quiet. Even Marcus's friends looked uncomfortable with what he had said. But Marcus felt proud of himself. He was getting under Ms. Rodriguez's skin just like he planned. I see, Ms. Rodriguez said. Let's talk about that after class. When the bell rang, Marcus packed his bag slowly. He wanted all the other students to see that he wasn't afraid to stay behind. He wanted them to know that Ms. Rodriguez couldn't intimidate him. After the last student left, Ms. Rodriguez closed the classroom door. She walked over to Marcus's desk and sat in the chair next to him. Marcus, she said quietly, I need you to understand something. In my classroom, we treat everyone with respect. That includes people who are different from us. Marcus leaned back in his chair. I was just sharing my opinion. Isn't that what school is for? Sharing opinions is good. But calling poor people lazy isn't an opinion. It's an insult to millions of hardworking people. Marcus rolled his eyes. Whatever. Are we done here? Ms. Rodriguez studied his face for a moment. She could see the anger behind his fake smile. She could see that he was testing her, waiting for her to give up like everyone else had. We're done for today, she said. But Marcus, this behavior needs to stop. You're better than this. Marcus stood up and grabbed his bag. You don't know anything about me, he said as he walked toward the door. That afternoon, Marcus met with his friends at their usual spot in the courtyard. Brad, Sarah, and Tom were all waiting to hear what happened. So what did she say? Sarah asked. She gave me some lecture about respecting poor people, Marcus said with disgust, like she's some kind of saint or something. Are you going to tell your dad? Tom asked. Marcus thought about it. He could call his father and have Ms. Rodriguez fired by the end of the week. It would be easy. His father had done it before with teachers who caused problems, but that felt too simple. Marcus wanted to defeat Ms. Rodriguez himself. He wanted to break her spirit the way he had broken other teachers. Firing her would be like admitting he couldn't handle one woman with an old leather bag. No, Marcus said finally. I want to have some fun with her first. Over the next few weeks, Marcus turned disrupting Ms. Rodriguez's class into an art form. He organized elaborate schemes to waste class time and make learning impossible. On Wednesday, Marcus convinced half the class to ask to use the bathroom at the same time. Students kept raising their hands every few minutes, interrupting the lesson about World War I. On Thursday, Marcus brought a small speaker hidden in his backpack. Every time Ms. Rodriguez turned to write on the board, he played quiet music that stopped the moment she turned around. It took her 20 minutes to figure out where the sound was coming from. On Friday, Marcus started a campaign to question everything Ms. Rodriguez said. He would raise his hand and ask for proof of every historical fact she mentioned. When she explained the causes of the Great Depression, Marcus demanded to see original documents. When she discussed the American Revolution, Marcus insisted she prove that George Washington really existed. The other students didn't know what to do. Some of them wanted to learn, but they were afraid to go against Marcus. Others thought his pranks were funny but worried about getting in trouble. A few tried to stay neutral by keeping quiet and hoping the conflict would end soon. Ms. Rodriguez handled each disruption with patience, but Marcus could see he was wearing her down. She looked tired. She stayed after school longer to prepare lessons that Marcus would just ruin the next day. She called parents who promised to talk to their children but never actually did anything. The breaking point came when Marcus turned in his first major assignment. Ms. Rodriguez had asked the class to write a 5-page research paper about a social justice movement. It was worth 25% of their grade. Marcus waited until the last minute to do anything about it. The night before it was due, he went online and found a single paragraph about the civil rights movement on Wikipedia. He copied it word for word and printed it out. The next morning, he handed in the 1-paragraph paper with a big smile. He had written his name at the top in fancy letters and used expensive paper to make it look official. When Ms. Rodriguez collected the papers, she noticed immediately that Marcus's was different. She read it quickly and recognized the Wikipedia entry. She had read the same article while preparing her lesson plans. "Mr. Wellington," she said quietly, "could you stay after class, please?" Marcus felt confident. He had never failed an assignment before. Teachers always found ways to give him passing grades even when his work was terrible. After the other students left, Ms. Rodriguez placed the paper on Marcus's desk. Next to it, she put a printed copy of the Wikipedia article he had stolen from. "This is plagiarism," she said simply. Marcus looked at the 2 papers. They were identical word for word. He had been caught red-handed, so, Marcus said, trying to sound like he didn't care. "So you're getting a 0 on this assignment," Ms. Rodriguez replied. Marcus felt a shock go through his body. "You can't do that. I can and I will. You had 3 weeks to complete this assignment. You chose to cheat instead." Marcus stood up quickly, knocking his chair backward. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is?" Ms. Rodriguez looked at him calmly. "I know exactly who you are, Marcus. You're a 17-year-old student who just cheated on his assignment. Your father's money doesn't change that." For the first time in his life, Marcus felt powerless. No teacher had ever spoken to him this way. No adult had ever told him that his family's wealth didn't matter. Marcus felt rage building inside him like steam in a pressure cooker. Ms. Rodriguez had humiliated him. She had treated him like any ordinary student. She had forgotten her place in the social order of Riverside Preparatory Academy. Marcus picked up his bag and headed for the door. But before he left, he turned back to look at Ms. Rodriguez one more time. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. Ms. Rodriguez watched him go, knowing that she had just made a powerful enemy. But she also knew she had done the right thing. She had treated Marcus fairly, just like she treated all her students. Marcus walked through the hallways with his mind racing. He was done playing small games with Ms. Rodriguez. It was time to destroy her completely. It was time to show her what happened when someone forgot their place at Riverside Preparatory Academy. The real war was about to begin. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus received his first failing grade ever. The 0 on his research paper had eaten away at him like poison. Every night he lay awake planning his revenge against Ms. Rodriguez. Every morning, he looked at himself in the mirror and promised that today would be the day she learned her lesson. The opportunity came during a class discussion about privilege and opportunity in modern society. Ms. Rodriguez had planned the lesson carefully, hoping to help her students understand how different people faced different challenges in life. "Today we're going to explore how the circumstances of your birth can affect your opportunities," Ms. Rodriguez began. "Some people are born into wealthy families with many advantages. Others are born into poverty and face many obstacles." Marcus felt his anger rising immediately. This was exactly the kind of lesson he hated. Ms. Rodriguez was always talking about poor people and their problems. She acted like being rich was something to be ashamed of. "Can anyone think of advantages that wealthy families might have?" Ms. Rodriguez asked. Jennifer raised her hand. "Better schools?" "Good, what else?" "Better health care," said Tom. "More opportunities for college," added Sarah. Marcus listened to his classmates list all the ways rich people had better lives. Each answer made him angrier. Why should he feel guilty about his family's success? Why should he apologize for having money? "Now," Ms. Rodriguez continued, "can anyone think of challenges that poor families might face?" This time, more hands went up. The students talked about bad neighborhoods, limited access to good education, and families where parents worked multiple jobs just to pay rent. "These are all excellent points," Ms. Rodriguez said. "It's important to understand that success in life isn't just about working hard. It's also about the opportunities you're given. Marcus couldn't stay quiet anymore. He raised his hand with sharp, angry movements. Yes, Marcus? I think you're wrong, Marcus said loudly. My family is successful because we're better than other people. We're smarter. We work harder. We make better choices. The classroom got quiet. The other students could hear the anger in Marcus's voice. They had seen him disrupt class before, but this felt different. This felt dangerous. That's one perspective, Ms. Rodriguez said carefully. But don't you think circumstances matter too? What if you had been born into a different family? I wasn't born into a different family because I deserved better, Marcus replied. His voice was getting louder. Poor people deserve to be poor. If they were worth anything, they wouldn't be poor. Several students looked uncomfortable. Even Brad and Tom, who usually supported Marcus, seemed embarrassed by what he was saying. Ms. Rodriguez took a deep breath. She had dealt with privileged students before, but Marcus was taking it to a new level. Marcus, that's not how society works. Many factors contribute to, don't lecture me about society, Marcus shouted, standing up from his desk. You don't know anything about the real world. The room went completely silent. Everyone stared at Marcus as he stood there shaking with rage. Ms. Rodriguez remained calm, but her hands were trembling slightly. Marcus, please sit down so we can discuss this respectfully, she said. But Marcus was beyond listening. All his anger and frustration from the past few weeks exploded out of him at once. Before he knew what he was doing, he climbed up on top of his desk. Standing above everyone else, Marcus felt powerful again. He looked down at Ms. Rodriguez with all the hatred he had been building up inside. You want to know the truth? Marcus yelled. You want to know why you're always talking about poor people? It's because you are poor people. The other students gasped. No one had ever spoken to a teacher like this at Riverside Preparatory Academy. Marcus was just getting started. Look at yourself, he continued, his voice echoing through the classroom. Look at your pathetic clothes. Look at that ugly old bag you carry around. Look at that piece of junk you call a car in the parking lot. Ms. Rodriguez stood frozen as Marcus's words hit her like physical blows. She thought about her second-hand clothes that she had bought at discount stores. She thought about her old leather bag that had been with her for years. She thought about her small, reliable car that she had bought used because it was all she could afford. You're just jealous, Marcus screamed. You're bitter because you're a failure. You couldn't make anything of your life, so now you're trying to make successful people feel bad about themselves. The cruelty in Marcus's voice shocked everyone in the room. Jennifer had tears in her eyes. Tom was staring at his desk. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear. But Marcus wasn't finished. He had been holding back his anger for weeks, and now it all poured out. You probably grew up in some trailer park, he continued. You probably went to community college because you weren't smart enough for a real school. You probably live in a tiny apartment because you can't afford anything better. Each word cut deeper into Ms. Rodriguez. Marcus didn't know how close to the truth some of his guesses were. She had grown up poor. She did live in a small apartment. She had worked multiple jobs to pay for her education. And now you want to teach us about privilege? Marcus laughed cruelly. You want to tell us how the world works? Lady, you're nobody. You're nothing. You're just some bitter old woman who's mad that other people have what you'll never have. Ms. Rodriguez felt something break inside her chest. She had faced criticism before. She had dealt with difficult students. But no one had ever attacked her so personally, so viciously, so publicly. The classroom was completely silent except for Marcus's heavy breathing. He stood on the desk like a king looking down at his subjects, proud of the destruction he had caused. Ms. Rodriguez's hands were shaking now, but she kept her voice steady. Marcus, she said quietly, step down from the desk. Why? Marcus sneered. Are you going to give me another 0? Are you going to keep pretending you have any power here? Step down from the desk and come with me, Ms. Rodriguez repeated. Something in her tone made Marcus realize that other people were watching. He looked around the classroom and saw the shocked faces of his classmates. Some of them looked scared. Others looked disgusted. For a moment, Marcus felt a tiny bit of doubt. Had he gone too far? But then he pushed the feeling away. Ms. Rodriguez deserved everything he had said. She had embarrassed him with that 0, and now he had embarrassed her back. Marcus climbed down from the desk slowly like a conquering hero. He picked up his bag and looked at Ms. Rodriguez with a satisfied smile. Where are we going? He asked. Outside, Ms. Rodriguez said. We need to talk. As they walked toward the door, Marcus could feel the eyes of every student in the room following him. He had just given the performance of his life. He had put Ms. Rodriguez in her place once and for all. But as they stepped into the hallway, Marcus didn't see the looks of admiration he expected from his classmates. Instead, he saw expressions of shock, disappointment, and shame. Jennifer was crying quietly at her desk. Tom was shaking his head slowly. Sarah was staring at the door with her mouth open. For the first time in weeks, the classroom was completely quiet. But it wasn't the respectful quiet of students paying attention. It was the heavy, uncomfortable quiet that comes after someone has done something terrible. In the hallway, Ms. Rodriguez turned to face Marcus. Her eyes were red, but she held her head high. "What you just did in there," she said softly, "was unacceptable." Marcus shrugged. "I just told the truth." Ms. Rodriguez looked at him for a long moment. She saw a spoiled, angry boy who had never learned that words could hurt people. She saw someone who thought cruelty was strength and kindness was weakness. "No, Marcus," she said finally. "What you did was show everyone exactly who you really are." Marcus felt a small chill run down his spine, but he pushed it away. He had won. He had finally put Ms. Rodriguez in her place. Everyone would remember this day as the moment Marcus Wellington III proved that nobody could touch him. He had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The next morning, Marcus woke up feeling like a champion. He had slept better than he had in weeks. In his mind, he had finally won his war against Ms. Rodriguez. She would probably quit by the end of the week, just like he wanted. Marcus took his time getting ready for school. He chose his most expensive clothes and styled his hair perfectly. He wanted to look good when everyone congratulated him for putting the teacher in her place. His phone buzzed with text messages from classmates, but Marcus didn't bother reading them. He assumed they were all praising him for his performance yesterday. He would read them later when he had time to enjoy the compliments properly. The drive to school felt different somehow. Marcus noticed that his driver, Carlos, kept looking at him in the rearview mirror. But Carlos never said much anyway, so Marcus didn't think about it. When Marcus arrived at school, he expected to be greeted like a hero. Instead, he noticed that students were looking at him strangely. Some whispered to each other when he walked by. Others turned away when he tried to make eye contact. Marcus found Brad by the lockers and walked over with a big smile. "Hey man, can you believe what happened yesterday?" Brad looked uncomfortable. "Marcus, we need to talk." "Sure, what's up?" Brad pulled Marcus aside where other students couldn't hear them. "Dude, what you did to Ms. Rodriguez was really messed up." Marcus felt confused. "What do you mean?" "I finally put her in her place. You made her cry, Marcus. After you left, she stood there for like 5 minutes trying not to cry in front of everyone. So, maybe now she'll learn to respect her students." Brad shook his head. "Man, that's not respect. That's just being cruel." Jennifer cried for the rest of class. Tom said it was the worst thing he's ever seen anyone do to a teacher. Marcus felt a tiny doubt creep into his mind, but he pushed it away. "They're just being dramatic. Ms. Rodriguez had it coming." "Did she? What did she actually do to you, Marcus? Give you one bad grade? That's what teachers are supposed to do when you cheat." Before Marcus could answer, the morning announcements came over the speaker system. "Marcus Wellington III, please report to Principal Harrison's office immediately." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had been called to the principal's office before, but never with that serious tone. Usually, when he got in trouble, the secretary would just mention it casually. This sounded different. "I'm sure it's nothing," Marcus told Brad, but his voice didn't sound as confident as before. The walk to the principal's office felt longer than usual. Marcus passed several teachers in the hallway, and none of them smiled at him like they normally did. Mrs. Patterson from English actually frowned when she saw him. When Marcus reached the office, the secretary looked at him coldly. "Go right in," she said. "They're waiting for you." "They?" Marcus had expected to see Principal Harrison alone, like always. Instead, when he opened the door, he found a room full of people. Principal Harrison sat behind his big desk, looking more serious than Marcus had ever seen him. In chairs facing the desk were Marcus's parents. His father wore his most expensive suit, the one he saved for important business meetings. His mother was dressed formally too, which was unusual for a school morning. Off to the side sat a man Marcus didn't recognize. He had a briefcase and looked like a lawyer, which probably meant he was a lawyer. "Sit down, Marcus." Principal Harrison said without any of his usual friendliness. Marcus took the empty chair between his parents. His father didn't look at him. His mother's face was pale and worried. Marcus, Principal Harrison began, Ms. Rodriguez has filed a formal complaint about your behavior yesterday. Marcus felt relieved. A formal complaint was just paperwork. His father had made those disappear before. I'm sure we can work this out, Marcus's father said, using his business voice. Marcus can apologize and we can put this behind us. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Mr. Wellington, Principal Harrison replied. What happened yesterday went far beyond normal disciplinary issues. Marcus engaged in verbal abuse of a faculty member in front of an entire class. Marcus's mother spoke for the first time. Principal Harrison, surely you understand that teenagers sometimes say things they don't mean. Marcus is a good boy. He just got a little emotional. Mrs. Wellington, I've spoken to several students who witnessed the incident. This wasn't a moment of emotion. This was a calculated attack designed to humiliate and hurt Ms. Rodriguez. The lawyer leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, Principal Harrison? Principal Harrison opened a file on his desk. Marcus is being suspended from school for 2 weeks, effective immediately. When he returns, he'll be on academic probation for the remainder of the semester. Marcus felt like he'd been hit by a truck. Suspended? You can't suspend me. My family donates millions to this school. Marcus, his father said sharply, be quiet. But Marcus couldn't be quiet. This wasn't how things were supposed to work. His family's money was supposed to protect him from consequences. This is ridiculous, Marcus shouted. All I did was tell the truth about some teacher. She's nobody. We own this place. Principal Harrison's face got very serious. Mr. Wellington, your son just proved my point. His behavior yesterday wasn't an accident. It's part of a pattern of believing that wealth gives him the right to treat other people badly. Marcus's father finally spoke to him directly. Marcus, what did you say to this teacher? Marcus looked around the room. Everyone was staring at him, waiting for an answer. He realized that nobody had told his parents the details yet. I pointed out that she's not very successful, Marcus said weakly. What exactly did you say? His father pressed. Marcus felt trapped. He couldn't repeat his words from yesterday, not in front of his parents and the principal. They sounded different now, meaner and smaller. Principal Harrison consulted his notes. According to witnesses, Marcus called Ms. Rodriguez pathetic, bitter, a failure, and nobody. He mocked her appearance, her car, and her living situation. He suggested she grew up in a trailer park and went to community college because she wasn't smart enough for a real school. The room got very quiet. Marcus watched his mother's face change as she heard what he had done. She looked shocked and ashamed. His father's jaw was tight with anger. Marcus, is this true? Marcus wanted to explain that Ms. Rodriguez had started it by giving him a 0. He wanted to tell them about all the ways she had embarrassed him. But looking at their faces, he could see that nothing he said would make this better. She gave me a 0 for no reason, Marcus said quietly. She gave you a 0 because you plagiarized your assignment, Principal Harrison replied. I have copies of both your paper and the Wikipedia article you copied from. Marcus's father closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead. His mother was staring at her hands. The lawyer spoke up. What are Ms. Rodriguez's options here? Is she planning to take this further? She could file a harassment complaint with the police if she wanted to, Principal Harrison said. Verbal abuse can be a criminal matter, especially when it creates a hostile work environment. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. Criminal? I didn't do anything criminal. You publicly humiliated a teacher in front of her students, Principal Harrison explained. You attacked her personal life and financial situation. You created an environment where she can't effectively do her job. Marcus's father finally looked at him, and Marcus had never seen his father so angry. Do you have any idea what you've done? His father asked quietly. Do you understand that your behavior could destroy everything our family has built? Marcus didn't understand. His father had always fixed his problems before. Money had always made everything go away. Can't you just donate more money? Marcus asked desperately. His father stood up quickly, his chair scraping against the floor. Is that what you think? That we can just buy our way out of you being cruel to an innocent person? Marcus had never seen his father this upset. Even his mother looked surprised by the anger in her husband's voice. Mr. Wellington, Principal Harrison said, Your donation history is exactly why we can't let this slide. We can't have people thinking that money buys immunity from consequences at Riverside Preparatory Academy. The lawyer was taking notes. What would it take to resolve this quietly? Ms. Rodriguez would need to agree to any settlement, Principal Harrison replied. And frankly, after what Marcus did to her yesterday, I don't think she's in a forgiving mood. Marcus felt his world crashing down around him. For the first time in his life, his family's money couldn't protect him. For the first time, he was facing real consequences for his actions. The suspension starts now, Principal Harrison said. Marcus, you need to clean out your locker and leave the campus immediately. As they walked out of the office, Marcus could feel everyone watching him. Students whispered as he passed. Teachers stared from their doorways. Even the janitor looked at him with disgust. In the parking lot, Marcus's father finally exploded. 17 years old and you still don't understand that other people have feelings. What is wrong with you? Marcus had never heard his father yell like this before. It scared him more than the suspension. She started it, Marcus said weakly. She started it by doing her job, his father shouted. She started it by treating you like every other student instead of like some kind of prince. Marcus's mother was crying quietly in the back seat of their car. Sarah Chen sat in her bedroom that evening, staring at her laptop screen. She couldn't stop thinking about what Marcus had done to Ms. Rodriguez. The image of their teacher standing there, trying not to cry, kept playing in her mind over and over again. Sarah had always been one of Marcus's friends, or at least she thought she was. She ate lunch at his table, got invited to his parties, and felt important because he acknowledged her existence. But after yesterday's outburst, she felt sick to her stomach every time she thought about him. The way Marcus had attacked Ms. Rodriguez was different from his usual pranks and disruptions. This had been personal and cruel in a way that made Sarah question everything she thought. She knew about her friend. Sarah decided to learn more about Ms. Rodriguez. She had always been curious about their history teacher, who seemed different from the other faculty at Riverside Preparatory Academy. While other teachers wore expensive clothes and drove nice cars, Ms. Rodriguez was clearly struggling financially. But she never complained or asked for sympathy. Sarah opened her laptop and typed Elena Rodriguez into the search engine. Thousands of results appeared, but most were for other people with the same name. Sarah tried adding teacher to her search, but that didn't help much either. Then Sarah remembered something. During one of their first classes, Ms. Rodriguez had mentioned that she used to live in the next town over, Millbrook. Sarah typed Elena Rodriguez Millbrook into the search box and pressed enter. The first few results were still about other people, but then Sarah saw something that made her heart stop. About halfway down the page was a link to an old newspaper article from the Millbrook Daily News. The headline read, "Local woman saves 7 children from apartment fire." Sarah clicked on the link with shaking fingers. The article was from 15 years ago, and the website looked old and basic. But there, in a grainy black and white photograph, was a face Sarah recognized immediately. It was definitely Ms. Rodriguez, but younger. Her hair was shorter and her face was covered with soot, but her eyes were the same. She was carrying a small child in her arms, and behind her, smoke was pouring out of a large apartment building. Sarah read the article with growing amazement. Elena Rodriguez, E8, a firefighter with the Millbrook Fire Department, rescued 7 children from a burning apartment building on Maple Street last night. The fire started around 11 p.m. when faulty wiring in the basement sparked a blaze that quickly spread. Through the 4-story building, Rodriguez was first on the scene and entered the burning building 3 separate times to bring children to safety. I could hear them crying from inside, Rodriguez told reporters. There was no way I was leaving anyone behind. The children, ages 3 to 12, were all taken to Millbrook General Hospital for smoke inhalation, but are expected to make full recoveries. Fire Chief Robert Martinez praised Rodriguez's bravery. Elena risked her own life to save those kids. She's a true hero. This is not the first time Rodriguez has shown exceptional courage. Last year, she pulled a family of 4 from a car that had crashed into Miller's Pond during a winter storm. She has been with the Millbrook Fire Department for 6 years and is currently studying for her master's degree in education at State University. Sarah stared at the screen in shock. Ms. Rodriguez had been a firefighter. Not just any firefighter, but a hero who had saved multiple lives. And she had been working on her teaching degree even then, 15 years ago. Sarah's mind raced as she thought about Marcus's cruel words yesterday. He had called Ms. Rodriguez a failure. He had mocked her old car and simple clothes. He had suggested she was bitter about her lack of success. But Ms. Rodriguez wasn't unsuccessful. She was someone who had spent years running into burning buildings to save other people's children. She was someone who had risked her own life for strangers. She was someone who had worked full-time as a firefighter while also going to graduate school. Sarah knew she had to find out more. She spent the next hour searching for every article she could find about Elena Rodriguez. What she discovered amazed her even more. There was an article about Ms. Rodriguez saving a man who had fallen through ice on a frozen lake. Another article described how she had performed CPR on a heart attack victim in a grocery store parking lot. A third article mentioned her getting a commendation for bravery after she crawled into a collapsed building to rescue an elderly woman. But the most important article was from 8 years ago. The headline read, "Firefighter injured in warehouse blaze forced to retire." Sarah read the article carefully. Elena Rodriguez, a 12-year veteran of the Millbrook Fire Department, suffered serious injuries during a warehouse fire on Industrial Road yesterday. Rodriguez was attempting to rescue 2 workers trapped on the second floor when part of the ceiling collapsed, crushing her left leg and causing severe smoke inhalation damage to her lungs. Rodriguez was rushed to City General Hospital where she underwent emergency surgery. While her injuries are not life-threatening, doctors say the damage to her leg and respiratory system will prevent her from continuing her career as a firefighter. "Elena is one of the bravest people I've ever known," said Fire Chief Martinez. "She saved more than 30 lives during her time with us. The department won't be the same without her." Rodriguez, who was studying for her master's degree in education, plans to pursue teaching full-time. "I've always loved working with young people," she said from her hospital bed. "If I can't save lives as a firefighter anymore, maybe I can make a difference as a teacher." Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. Ms. Rodriguez hadn't become a teacher because she couldn't do anything else. She had become a teacher because she could no longer risk her life saving other people. Her old car and simple clothes weren't signs of failure. They were signs of someone who had spent her life serving others instead of accumulating wealth. Sarah immediately called Jennifer, her closest friend in their history class. "Jen, you have to see this," Sarah said as soon as Jennifer answered. "What's wrong? You sound upset." "I just found out something incredible about Ms. Rodriguez. Can you come over right now?" 20 minutes later, Jennifer was sitting beside Sarah at her computer, reading the same articles with the same shock and amazement. "Oh my God," Jennifer whispered. "She saved all those people." "Look at this one," Sarah said, clicking to another article. "She got the Medal of Valor from the state governor. And this one says she was Volunteer Firefighter of the Year 3 times in a row." Jennifer wiped tears from her eyes. "Marcus called her a failure. He said she was nobody." "She's the opposite of nobody," Sarah replied. "She's a genuine hero." The 2 girls spent the next hour reading every article they could find. They learned that Ms. Rodriguez had paid for her master's degree with her disability settlement from the fire department. They discovered that she had volunteered at homeless shelters and food banks during her years as a firefighter. They read testimonials from parents whose children she had saved. "We have to tell people about this," Jennifer said finally. "Tell them what? That Marcus is even more horrible than we thought?" "Tell them who Ms. Rodriguez really is," Jennifer replied. "Tell them that they're sitting in class with someone who spent 12 years risking her life to save strangers." Sarah nodded slowly. She thought about how Ms. Rodriguez never talked about her past, never bragged about her heroism, never asked for special treatment because of her service. She just came to work every day, trying to teach spoiled rich kids about history and respect. "How do we do it without making it seem like we're gossiping?" Sarah asked. Jennifer thought for a moment. "What if we print some of these articles? We could leave them places where people would find them naturally, like on the bulletin board in the hallway, or in the library, or maybe leave them in the classroom before Ms. Rodriguez gets there." Sarah liked the idea, but she had a better one. "What if we email the links to everyone in our class? We could say we found something interesting about our teacher and wanted to share it." Over the next hour, the 2 girls carefully selected the most powerful articles about Ms. Rodriguez's heroism. They chose the story about the apartment fire, the piece about her Medal of Valor, and the article about her career-ending injury. Sarah wrote a simple email. I found these articles about Ms. Rodriguez and thought you might be interested. It turns out our history teacher is pretty amazing. She sent the email to everyone in their history class and then to some friends in other classes too. Within an hour, her phone was buzzing with text messages from classmates who were reading the articles with the same shock she had felt. "I can't believe this," texted Brad. "She's a real hero," wrote Tom. "I feel so ashamed about what Marcus did," replied another classmate as word spread through the school's social networks. More students began searching for information about Ms. Rodriguez. They found additional articles, more stories of heroism, more evidence of a woman who had spent her life serving others. By the next morning, it seemed like every student at Riverside Preparatory Academy knew the truth about their history teacher. They knew that the woman Marcus had called a failure had actually saved over 30 lives. They knew that the teacher he had mocked for being poor had earned every dollar through sacrifice and service. Word spread through Riverside Preparatory Academy like wildfire. By the end of the week, it seemed like every student, teacher, and staff member had heard about Ms. Rodriguez's incredible past. The hallways buzzed with conversations about their hero teacher. Students who had never paid attention in history class suddenly wanted to know everything about Elena Rodriguez. They searched online for more articles, shared stories with friends, and looked at their teacher with completely new eyes. In the teacher's lounge, faculty members were equally amazed. Many of them had worked alongside Ms. Rodriguez for months without knowing about her previous career. They felt embarrassed that they had seen her old clothes and modest car as signs of someone who didn't belong at their prestigious school. "I can't believe she never mentioned it," said Mrs. Patterson, the English teacher. "If I had saved 30 people, I'd probably bring it up in conversation." "That's exactly why she's special," replied Mr. Johnson from the chemistry department. "Real heroes don't need to brag about what they've done." The school librarian, Mrs. Foster, decided to create a small display about Ms. Rodriguez's firefighting career. She printed several newspaper articles and arranged them on a bulletin board near the entrance. Students gathered around the display between classes, reading the stories with fascination and respect. The most powerful discovery came from a student named David Kim, whose research skills were better than most. David found a video interview that Ms. Rodriguez had given to the local news after receiving her Medal of Valor. In the interview, she was asked what motivated her to risk her life for strangers. "I grew up poor," Ms. Rodriguez had said simply. "I know what it feels like to think nobody cares about you. When I see someone in trouble, I can't just walk away. Everyone deserves to have someone fight for them." David shared the video link with his classmates, and soon it was being watched by students throughout the school. The video showed a younger Ms. Rodriguez, still in her firefighter uniform, speaking with the same quiet strength they saw in her classroom every day. But the video revealed something else that made Marcus's attack even more cruel. When the reporter asked about her future plans, Ms. Rodriguez had smiled and said, "I'm working on my master's degree in education. I think teaching might be my calling after firefighting. Both jobs are about helping people grow and become their best selves." The students realized that Ms. Rodriguez had always wanted to be a teacher, even during her firefighting career. Teaching wasn't a backup plan for her. It was another way to serve people. Another way to save lives, just with books instead of fire hoses. Jennifer found an article that broke her heart. It was an interview with Maria Santos, a woman whose 3 children had been saved by Ms. Rodriguez in the apartment fire 15 years ago. "Elena didn't just save their lives," Maria had said. "She visited them in the hospital every day until they were released. She brought them toys and books. She helped me find a new apartment after we lost everything. She stayed in touch with our family for years, always checking on the kids." The article went on to describe how Ms. Rodriguez had used her own money to help families who had lost everything in fires. She had organized clothing drives for fire victims. She had even helped some children with their homework during her off-duty hours. "She told my kids that education was their way out of poverty," Maria had said. "She said knowledge was the one thing nobody could ever take away from them. 2 of my children are in college now, and they both say Ms. Rodriguez inspired them to study hard." When Jennifer read this to her classmates, many of them started crying. They thought about how Marcus had mocked Ms. Rodriguez for caring about poor people, not knowing that she had spent years helping families escape poverty through education. The most shocking discovery came from a student named Alex Rivera. His older brother had attended Millbrook Community College, and remembered Ms. Rodriguez from her student days. There, she didn't go to community college because she wasn't smart enough for a real school, Alex told his friends. She went there because she was working full-time as a firefighter, and it was the only place that offered night classes. She had to study between emergency calls. Alex's brother had saved his old yearbook from community college, and it contained a photo that amazed everyone who saw it. The picture showed Ms. Rodriguez receiving an award for academic excellence. She was wearing her firefighter uniform because she had come straight from a shift to attend the ceremony. The caption under the photo read, "Elena Rodriguez receives the President's Award for maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working full-time as a first responder." Rodriguez completed her bachelor's degree in 3 years while serving with the Millbrook Fire Department. Students passed around a photocopy of the yearbook page, marveling at the image of their teacher in her firefighter gear, holding an academic award. It was the perfect symbol of who she really was, someone who served others while also working to better herself through education. By the second week of Marcus's suspension, the entire school had transformed in its view of Ms. Rodriguez. Students who had previously seen her as just another teacher now understood they were learning from someone truly extraordinary. Her history classes became the most popular in school. Students paid attention like never before. They asked thoughtful questions and participated in discussions with genuine enthusiasm. They realized that someone who had seen so much of real life had valuable lessons to teach them. The change in atmosphere was obvious to Ms. Rodriguez, though she didn't fully understand why it had happened. Students were more respectful, more engaged, and more eager to learn. They looked at her with something that seemed like admiration, though she couldn't figure out what she had done to earn it. "You seem to have really connected with your students," Principal Harrison told her during a routine meeting. "I've never seen kids so excited about history class." Ms. Rodriguez smiled modestly. "They're good kids. They just needed time to warm up to me." What she didn't know was that her students had also learned about the physical toll her firefighting career had taken on her body. They discovered that she still dealt with breathing problems from smoke inhalation. They learned that her left leg caused her pain, especially on cold days. They noticed that she sometimes winced when she thought nobody was looking. This knowledge made them see her daily struggles in a new light. Her pathetic car was actually perfectly maintained and reliable. Exactly what someone would choose who understood the value of things that worked well. Her simple clothes were clean, professional, and practical. The choices of someone who cared more about function than fashion. Students began to understand that Ms. Rodriguez's modest lifestyle wasn't a sign of failure, but a reflection of different values. She had chosen service over wealth, helping others over helping herself, and making a difference over making money. The most touching discovery came from a student named Lisa Park, whose grandmother lived in a nursing home in Millbrook. When Lisa mentioned her teacher's name, her grandmother's face lit up with recognition. "Elena Rodriguez? The firefighter? Oh, honey, she's an angel. She saved my neighbor's grandson from that terrible fire years ago. And after she got hurt and couldn't fight fires anymore, she still volunteered at the community center, tutoring kids for free." Lisa learned that Ms. Rodriguez had spent her recovery time from her injury teaching reading to adults who had never learned, helping elderly people with their taxes, and organizing food drives for struggling families. Even when she was dealing with her own physical and financial challenges, she had continued finding ways to help others. When Lisa shared this information with her classmates, the full picture of their teacher finally came into focus. Elena Rodriguez wasn't just someone who had been brave in emergency situations. She was someone who had built her entire life around serving other people, in big ways and small ways, every single day. The students began to understand that they were in the presence of someone truly special, not because she was famous or wealthy or powerful, but because she embodied everything their parents and teachers had always told them about good character, hard work, and putting others first. And somewhere in his family's mansion, Marcus Wellington III was serving out his suspension, completely unaware that his cruelest moment had accidentally revealed the true character of not just himself, but of the most remarkable person he had ever met. When he returned to school, Marcus would discover that everything had changed. His classmates now knew exactly who Ms. Rodriguez really was, and more importantly, they knew exactly who he was too. The hero and the villain of their story had been clearly identified. The only question now was whether Marcus would be brave enough to face the truth about both of them. Marcus Wellington III returned to school on a cold Monday morning in November. 2 weeks of suspension had felt like an eternity. He had spent most of that time alone in his room, playing video games and trying not to think about what had happened with Ms. Rodriguez. His parents had barely spoken to him during the suspension. His father had canceled his credit cards and taken away his car keys. His mother had looked at him with disappointment that cut deeper than any punishment. Even the household staff had seemed to avoid him, but Marcus told himself that everything would return to normal once he got back to school. His friends would welcome him back. Teachers would remember who his family was. The whole incident with Ms. Rodriguez would be forgotten, just like every other problem in his life had always been forgotten. Marcus was wrong about everything. The first sign that something had changed came when he walked through the main entrance. Students in the hallway stopped talking when they saw him, but instead of the respectful attention he was used to, their faces showed something Marcus had never seen before when people looked at him. Disgust. Groups of students whispered to each other as he passed. Marcus caught fragments of their conversations, but none of it made sense to him. Can you believe he said that to her? If he only knew who she really is, 30 people. She saved 30 people. Marcus tried to join his usual group by the lockers, but the reception was cold. Brad nodded at him without smiling. Tom barely looked up from his phone. Sarah turned away completely when she saw him coming. "Hey guys," Marcus said, trying to sound casual. "Good to be back." Nobody responded with enthusiasm. Brad finally spoke up. "Marcus, we need to talk." "Sure, what's up?" Brad pulled him aside just like he had on that morning 2 weeks ago, but this time his expression was even more serious. "Did you know Ms. Rodriguez used to be a firefighter?" Brad asked quietly. Marcus felt confused. "What?" "No, what does that have to do with anything? She saved 7 kids from a burning building, Marcus. She's got medals for bravery. She saved over 30 people during her career." Marcus stared at his friend, trying to process what he was hearing. "That's impossible. She's just a teacher. She became a teacher after she got hurt fighting a fire. She was in the hospital for months. She could have died trying to save people." Marcus felt something cold spreading through his chest. "How do you know all this?" "Everyone knows, Marcus. Sarah found newspaper articles about her. There are pictures of her carrying children out of burning buildings. There's a video of her getting a medal from the governor." Marcus leaned against the lockers, suddenly feeling dizzy. "When did you find out about this?" "The day after you were suspended. It's been all over school for 2 weeks. Everyone's been talking about what an amazing person she is." Brad paused. "And about what you said to her." Before Marcus could respond, the first bell rang. Students began moving toward their classrooms, but Marcus noticed they were giving him a wide space as they passed. It was like he had some kind of disease they didn't want to catch. Marcus walked to his first period class in a daze. His mind was racing, trying to understand what Brad had told him. Ms. Rodriguez had been a firefighter. She had saved children. She was some kind of hero. As he entered the English classroom, Marcus saw that someone had left a stack of photocopied newspaper articles on Mrs. Patterson's desk. The top article had a headline that made his blood turn cold. "Local woman saves 7 children from apartment fire." Even from across the room, Marcus could see the grainy photograph that accompanied the article. It showed a young woman in firefighter gear, carrying a small child in her arms. Her face was covered with soot, but her eyes were determined and caring. The woman in the photograph was definitely Ms. Rodriguez. Mrs. Patterson began class, but Marcus couldn't focus on anything she was saying. His mind kept returning to the things he had said to Ms. Rodriguez 2 weeks ago. He had called her pathetic. He had said she was a failure. He had mocked her for being poor, but if what Brad had told him was true, then Ms. Rodriguez wasn't a failure at all. She was someone who had risked her own life to save other people's children. She was someone who had been honored by the state governor. She was someone who had given up a heroic career because of injuries she received while serving others. Between classes, Marcus found himself walking past the library. He stopped when he saw the bulletin board display that Mrs. Foster had created. There, arranged carefully under a sign that read, "Honoring Our Heroes," were dozens of articles about Ms. Rodriguez's firefighting career. Marcus read the headlines with growing horror. "Firefighter honored for saving family from burning car." "Local hero pulls elderly woman from collapsed building, Medal of Valor recipient." "Everyone deserves someone to fight for them." "Career-ending injury forces brave." firefighter into early retirement. Marcus stared at a photograph showing Ms. Rodriguez receiving a medal from a man in an expensive suit. The caption identified him as the state governor. In the photo, Ms. Rodriguez looked proud but humble, exactly the way she looked when she taught their history class. Students gathered around the display, reading the articles with admiration and respect. Marcus heard their conversations, and each comment was like a knife in his chest. She never even mentioned she was a hero. Can you imagine running into a burning building to save strangers? And Marcus called her a failure. What a horrible person he is. Marcus hurried away from the library, but he couldn't escape the truth that was following him everywhere. By lunchtime, he understood that everyone in school knew about Ms. Rodriguez's past. They all knew what an extraordinary person she was, and they all remembered exactly what he had said to her. In the cafeteria, Marcus sat alone for the first time in his life. His usual table was occupied by his former friends, but there was no space for him. Literally no space. They had moved their chairs closer together, so there was no room for another person. Marcus got his lunch and found an empty table in the corner. As he ate, he could feel eyes watching him from all around the room. Students pointed at him and whispered. Teachers looked at him with expressions of disappointment and disgust. For the first time in his life, Marcus Wellington III was completely alone. The worst moment came during sixth period, when Marcus had to return to Ms. Rodriguez's history class. He had been dreading this moment for 2 weeks, but now it felt impossible to face. Marcus arrived at the classroom early, hoping to speak to Ms. Rodriguez privately before the other students arrived. But when he walked in, he found something that made his heart stop. On his desk was a handwritten letter. The envelope had his name written in careful script, and it was sealed with tape. Marcus looked around the empty classroom, then opened the letter with trembling fingers. The letter was from a boy named Miguel Santos. The handwriting was that of someone very young, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Dear Marcus, the letter began. My teacher, Mrs. Johnson, told me to write to you. She said you go to the same school as Ms. Rodriguez, who used to be a firefighter. Ms. Rodriguez saved me and my brother and sister when our apartment building burned down. I was only 3 years old, but my mom told me the story. Ms. Rodriguez went into the fire 3 times to get all the kids out. She could have died, but she saved us anyway. My mom says Ms. Rodriguez is the reason I'm alive today. She says I should always remember to be grateful to people who help others, even when it's dangerous. I heard that someone at your school was mean to Ms. Rodriguez. I wanted you to know that she's the best person in the world. She still sends me birthday cards every year. She helped my family when we didn't have anywhere to live after the fire. I hope whoever was mean to her will say they're sorry. She doesn't deserve to be hurt by anyone. Thank you for reading my letter. Miguel Santos, age 9. Marcus stared at the letter for a long time. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the paper. This little boy was alive because Ms. Rodriguez had risked her own life to save him. This little boy still received birthday cards from the teacher Marcus had publicly humiliated. Other students began arriving for class. They saw Marcus sitting at his desk with the letter, and they whispered to each other knowingly. Word had spread about Miguel's letter. Sarah had helped arrange for it to be delivered to Marcus. When Ms. Rodriguez entered the classroom, Marcus looked up at her with completely different eyes. She looked exactly the same as before, wearing simple clothes, carrying her old leather bag, moving with quiet confidence. But now Marcus knew the truth about those hands that had pulled children from burning buildings. Now he understood the strength behind those calm eyes that had seen so much tragedy and heroism. Ms. Rodriguez began her lesson about World War II resistance movements, talking about ordinary people who had shown extraordinary courage under terrible circumstances. As she spoke about heroes who had risked everything to save others, Marcus felt like she was describing herself, though she would never make that connection out loud. Sometimes, Ms. Rodriguez said to the class, the most important battles are fought by people who never expected to be heroes. They just saw something wrong and decided they couldn't walk away. Marcus thought about Miguel's letter. He thought about the 7 children,